Yes. Hi, Doug. Good morning.
Hi, Jagat. How are you?
Yes, good, good. And you're looking younger than last time I met you.
That's probably because you're
Uh,
younger as well. I think
okay, thank you.
perhaps international trade keeps us young.
Yeah, right. So, friends, here we are talking to Doug, who is the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. He is a chemical engineer and has a master's in management. And I didn't know before, but I think many of you also may not know that he has got 5 patents to his name. Right, Doug?
That's correct.
Yeah, and he speaks 4 languages. This is also I did not know. So very rightly, global chamber is the right word. And he has worked with corporates like Johnson and Johnson and Phelps Dodge and Data Preserve and Growth Nation. And then he started Global Chamber, which I've always believed that it has been very ahead of time. It has been visionary. And I don't know when he started Global Chamber, he must have thought about coronavirus, right? But today the whole world is actually on the model on which Global Chamber is being run. The whole world is following that, and it was very visionary. So, Doug, I would like to ask you some questions, and I would like all the viewers, my followers. I have 1 million followers on my social media, various platforms, and I do a lot of work in India and abroad. I want them to know about you and about Global Chamber. So, first of all, Doug, can you tell me where were you born and where did you, where were you brought up?
Sure. No, happy to answer that. And again, thank you for the opportunity to share with your community. I am an American. My heritage is German and Polish. I was born in a place called Mount Kisco, New York, which they call upstate New York, which is only about 30 miles north of New York City. So my great grandmother, Paula Gertz Bruhnke, was the one that brought us to the New York area. Most of the Brunkes are, there's only about 200 of them in the US, a very unusual name. Most of them are in the Chicago area. My great grandmother was the only one that diverted off to New York, and hence the Brunkes in New York are all part of my family.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's some history. Okay. So, and where are you based now?
I'm based in two places. So I've got a foot in Scottsdale, Arizona, US, and also Palo Alto, California, which is a little bit more famous. I've been very fortunate to have lived in a lot of different places, consider a lot of places my hometown, from New York originally to Utah, Texas, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Japan, Michigan, Singapore, Arizona, and now California as well. So I've been very fortunate to live in a lot of places, and some
Oh,
really good places as well.
okay. Right. So, Doug, tell me something about your career. Like, which year did you start working? Where you worked? What were your functions and your other career still till you started Global Chamber?
So it's actually been coming up to my 40 years graduating from college and starting my career with the DuPont company. I was had two different paths I could have taken. My dad was not an entrepreneur. He was a very smart electrical systems engineer. He actually worked on the U-2 spy plane, some very sophisticated top secret government projects through IBM primarily, and he retired with IBM. He took a very traditional route. He always talked about starting up his own company, and he never did. Uh, my grandfather, my mom's father, however, was entrepreneurial. So he was 50 years old working as a machinist at a shop, by far the best person in the New York City area doing that kind of work with a partner who owned the business. And one day, my grandfather overheard him at lunch say, "Oh, Joe, he's never going to be a part owner." So my grandfather heard that, my grandfather Joseph Brings, and he left. He picked up his lunch, he left the building, never talked to Mr. Meyer again.
Wow.
He went home, he nailed a nail into the wall in the basement, and my grandmother came down and was like, Joe, what are you doing home? What's going on? He says, I'm starting my own business. 50 years
Wow.
old, my mother was 12, my uncle was 8, and my grandmother started crying, saying, Joe, no, go back to work immediately. This is crazy. You have kids, you have a family. This is not the right time to do this. And kind of long story short, my grandfather, my pops, what we call him, really was my mentor for most of my life. I've watched him be very successful in his business. He retired. He became the oldest person in New York State to become a pilot, to get a pilot's license. Very dynamic, very entrepreneurial, and really was kind of my dream. So contrary to my father, I would say my grandfather really got me to become the entrepreneur eventually that I became.
Wow, this is like a script for a film.
That's very funny.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Doug, you have 5 patents, right? Wow. So
I do.
how did that come about?
So one of the great things about having an interesting business career is you get to hang out with some really smart people like you. And
Thank you.
so I've always been a mingler. I've always been a connector. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a chemical engineer originally. So I'm not really a classic chemical engineer. I'm somebody who's more around involved with being a catalyst, being a chemical catalyst between people and ideas. And so I hired into DuPont out of college as a chemical engineer, and it was a program that required that I move every 2 years, different programs, different location. And so I ended up, as part of that, my third assignment, they said, hey, we have an idea. Let's bring an engineer into our central research department. So this was DuPont's big place where they've invented Teflon and nylon. In fact, I worked in the building where Wallace Carruthers invented nylon.
Oh,
They
okay.
said, let's bring an engineer in there and have him manage the really smart people, because the smart people, they're just doing stuff off track. They need to be more focused in on commercial applications. We need to invent another nylon, another Teflon. So let's put Doug in there as a guinea pig. So basically, I was a supervisor of people. One guy had 84 patents. Another guy had 50 something patents. They're brilliant people. And so all I really needed to do was go into work. And lo and behold, through that activity, there were 5 patents, mainly on chlorofluorination chemistry, which nobody knows about. But what you may know about is it kind of was a byproduct of the Freon. Some of us are old enough, you're too young, Jagat, but when Freons were a bad thing, and basically DuPont was the main supplier of that,
Yes.
when they were looking for alternatives to Freon, it ended up being chlorofluorochemistry. 134A was the alternative. And out of that chemistry came the work that I was doing that turned out to be a variety of different products. But hanging out with smart people is always a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So, Doug, I met you in 2017 in US, and I used to wonder, and even now I wonder. So there are all these chambers of commerce in all the cities, right? In my city, in your city, we have got chamber of commerce, which primarily works with the locals, and they have some connection with outside. Then we have bilateral chambers of commerce. So we have Indo-US chamber maybe, or Indo-German chamber. So these chambers, they work country to country. Very few. I don't know any. Maybe you can correct me, but I don't know any which is multilateral chamber between many countries. So when I met you first time, when I understood your business model, I was like zap. And I had never known. I have been in international business for 25 years. I had never known that this multilateral kind of a chamber. So that was an amazing thing. So what I want to know, Doug, is when and how did you first think about this innovative and unique concept of global chamber?
Sure, there were a couple key things associated with the development of it. I think certainly one is my own personality. I'm very global. I think in global, and part of that is I've lived in so many places, and in each place there's always people that say, "Oh, our place is the best." And I've lived in so many places. Quite honestly, I'm not sure what's best. There's so many great places. I've traveled to
Right.
India, and across India, there's amazing things there. You know, the temples, the people, the food, it's extraordinary. If I actually had lived there yet, and maybe I will, you know, it would be another hometown that would be impressive. So global people like myself typically have a bug, if you will, for travel, and we think maybe outside of countries, outside of regions, and think about the commonalities between people. So I think that was one thing. Another thing was a senator, former senator for the state of Arizona. His son stood up in a meeting about 12 years or so ago and said, "We need to keep foreigners out of Arizona because they take our jobs." And so, as a Globie and as someone I think who understands how America got to be what it is immigrants are key. That's my family are immigrants. Immigrants have created most of the Fortune 500 companies. People want, historically, people have wanted to live in the US. And so he was wrong. Or I believe he's totally wrong. So I said, hey, I've got to start something. I've got to start educating people that immigration and foreign investment and doing international business is the way. So I started once a month doing a traditional type of group that said, hey, let's talk about exporting. Let's talk about foreign direct investment. The last piece of the third piece was I drove to San Diego from Arizona. So it's about 5.5, 6 hours drive to a World Trade Center event in San Diego. And so I drive these 6 hours to a wine and cheese event that I thought would be, hey, I get to meet the international community of San Diego. So I was tired and I was cranky, and I got there and the cheese wasn't very good and the wine was terrible. And it was a group of people that were not the Jagat Shahs of San Diego. If there are, probably nobody is a Jagat Shah of San Diego, but they were kind of not really inspiring people. And I thought to myself, yikes, you know, as an international person, this is not a way to do business. This is not a way to interact and find contacts and resources and clients. It's a needle in a haystack. There's got to be a better way. So I think those three elements were kind of key for Global Chamber to finally launch 5 years ago.
Oh wow, that's some background to Global Chamber. Very interesting. Yeah, your logic is very correct.